Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. You guys are not going to believe this, but it's actually snowing outside. Now, when I grew up, I loved snow. When I lived in LA, I craved snow. I once went 3 years, I think, without seeing it. And now that we live in the mountains and we experience snow on a regular basis, I'll be honest, I still love it. But snow in March is just downright cruel. Now I have what I believe to be an excellent episode lined up for you guys this evening. Now I say it that way because due to a recent camping trip and a bit of a time crunch, I did not have time to prepare this episode. So tonight is going to be yet another grab bag episode. So what do you say we quit talking about it and start sharing some of these stories? Now keep in mind going forward that I have not heard a single one of these stories for this evening, so these are all a surprise to me. Hopefully we uncover some really fun and creepy stuff. And to kick things off for the evening, we're going to start off with Joe's Call out of the state of Oregon.
Hey Derek, this is Joe from Oregon. I just wanted to call and let you know I really appreciate the podcast. I'm relatively new to it. My brother kind of turned me on to it. And since then, it's been about a few weeks and I've been listening to it pretty much every day, any chance I get when I'm riding in my truck. I really haven't never had anything paranormal or of the sort happen to me, but I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, and I've always been real fascinated, like with Bigfoot, UFOs, and whatnot. Through your podcast, I've actually learned about a lot of other things that I never really knew existed. My girlfriend and I and my 3 kids decided here last weekend before last, I think it was like the week of the 15th, decided to take a trip down to Crescent City, California, to go to the coast. And we left on a Saturday. The weather going down was pretty bad, almost all the way there, but luckily enough, once we got there, the weather kind of cleared up. And so we decided to go walk on the beach. And this is actually kind of a series of events that happened. And so we're walking on the beach, and we noticed that there was a lighthouse out a little ways. And my girlfriend really likes lighthouses, so we thought we'd go ahead and drive on over and go check it out, see if we could walk up to it. And one thing that kind of happened was I saw the lighthouse light turn on, it looked like, just for a brief second. And so I mentioned to her, hey, see the lighthouse, it looks like it turned on, and she kind of just chuckled at me, and it just came on for a second, kind of like if you were those lights that you dim the lights with the switch on and off, and it was just real quick. Didn't really think anything of it, figured maybe the sunlight hit it or something. You know, since I've been listening to your podcast, any odd thing, I immediately go to the idea of something strange or paranormal happening. But anyways, so didn't really think anything of it. We drove over to the lighthouse. It was low tide. It's actually called Battery Point Lighthouse. And we parked our car and were able to walk up and check it out. And I didn't realize this till after the fact, when I was kind of doing the research after the weekend that we had, was actually supposed to be haunted. It's, early 1800s, I believe, when it was built. And there were some things that happened. It's supposed to be haunted. So, but anyways, we walked up to it, walked around. Anytime it's like an old structure, old, place, I always like this, kind of feel the ground of the building or whatever and just kind of get in touch with it. It was pretty cool. It seemed real historical. We had a lot of fun. And then we left and went home to the house. We rented an Airbnb. And a normal night, watched a movie, went to bed. Sunday, we decided to drive up to what's called the Prehistoric Garden and check that out. On the way there, this is when kind of the first thing that happened. And again, I've never really had anything weird happen to me. So we're driving, and it's raining on and off, so the roads are a little wet, and the sun happened to be out, so there was some water evaporating off the road, and I'm wearing my sunglasses. Right about in the middle of the road, I see like this weird kind of, the only way to really describe it would be misty figure kind of just dart across the road. And I kind of look over to my girlfriend and I say, "You see that?" And she goes, "Yeah, that was weird." And mind you, my girlfriend is a complete skeptic. She doesn't buy into anything paranormal, Bigfoot, UFOs. She always laughs at me when I try to show her things or and whatnot. But she saw it too. And the only way to really describe it was, like I said, it was like it moved across the road real fast, and it had just a real like ghost-like feel to it. It wasn't, anything like. I immediately thought, well, maybe it's just the water evaporating off the road, and the wind blew it across. But it was real kind of a thick, smoky, kind of transparent, somewhat of a figure, and it was almost like if a deer was running across the road. We were about, I want to say, about 20 minutes heading north on Highway 101, just a little outside of Gold Beach, through the Prehistoric Gardens up there. This figure ran across the road. It, again, just appeared to be, real kind of ghost-like. And I immediately thought of all the possible reasons of what it is. Maybe it was a bird flying overhead, shadow, or maybe it was the water evaporating off the road, and blew it across. But it was really odd. My girlfriend, again, big skeptic, she thought it was really weird. So just kind of shook it off, thought that was strange. Went to the Prehistoric Garden, had some fun with the kids, and came back to the house. Nothing really out of the ordinary at all that night. We kind of talked about it a little bit. She was laughing at me. So I couldn't get it out of my mind of what that possibly could be. And we drove home Monday and started the work week. And it was, I think it was Tuesday evening is when something really, really strange happened to me, is what made me call this in. We were laying there going to sleep. I want to say it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm just about ready to fall asleep, and she's on her phone, just kind of in it, Facebook or something, and we hear this knock, knock, knock. I immediately kind of got my attention. I asked her, "Was that your phone?" She said, "No, that was not my phone." She said again, "That's strange." So I got up, just grabbed my flashlight, because the way my bed faces, it was coming from the left wall where my face, the left wall, which is actually towards the backyard of our house. Went outside, just kind of looked, and nothing was out there. I even went to the front door, pulled the front door, see if someone was knocking on the door, but it was real late at night. We live in a very quiet neighborhood outside of town. Of course, no one was there. Thought, no big deal. Went back to bed. Laying there again, about 5 minutes later, knock, knock, knock. Oh, man, that is so weird. And same sequence, 3 knocks, just loud enough, like it sounded like if someone was banging outside on the wall. She kind of got a little bit freaked out, so we both got up. Again, we went outside, shined my flashlight around, nothing's out there. We live in a residential neighborhood. There's houses on every side, but again, it's outside of town. It'd be very odd for anybody to be outside in our backyard. It's fully fenced. Okay, so we thought we'd just go back to bed. It was strange. 5 minutes later, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. At this point, I was pretty kind of concerned, not concerned, but just kind of alarmed. Couldn't figure out what it was. The knocks were so consistent, I couldn't imagine, my first thought, well, maybe it's the furnace. It was kind of a cold, rainy night. not snowing, but it's low 40s, maybe high 30s. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it's the furnace or cooling down or heating up, cooling down. I don't know. But at this point, I set my watch, the stopwatch, my Fitbit, and 6 minutes later, knock, knock, knock. And just like that, almost like you're knocking on the wall, knock, knock, knock. That went on probably for about between 5 and 10 minutes. That went on probably, I can remember, because eventually I went to sleep for about an hour. Every 5 to 10 minutes, knock, knock, knock. Couldn't figure out what it was. Of course, the whole number 3 thing has a pretty creepy theory behind it, urban legend behind it. And I just, kind of wanted to know what your thoughts on it were. I mean, my whole life, 35, nothing really out of the ordinary paranormal has ever happened to me. It was just a really weird kind of sequence of events that happened. Nothing really had me kind of alarmed until that night with the knocking. It's been on my mind since. I have some white sage. I'm thinking about just smudging my house. We just recently moved into there last November. The lady was a widow. So I wasn't sure if maybe that, if there was anything going on there, but just kind of wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. And like I was saying before, with the whole 3 and the urban legend behind that, it's been kind of freaky. The energy in the house has been real kind of thick. So again, appreciate the podcast. Gives people, an avenue to be able to kind of get some things that have happened to them out without, telling a buddy where they laugh at you and make fun of you. If anybody else has ever had an experience like this, I'd love to know their thoughts and kind of like to know your thoughts on it. So appreciate it. Thanks again. Appreciate the good work. Keep it up.
Thank you, Joe. Now, that region of California and the western coast in general is notorious for its fog. Now, it is possible that Joe simply saw fog shaped like a person. After all, it does sound like he did a good bit of driving that day, so it's possible he had tired eyes. Then again, his girlfriend also claimed to have seen the apparition, so perhaps that hits the reset button, so to speak. Now, as for the knocks, there are several things that can produce a knocking sound in your walls. Sudden temperature changes can cause shrinking and swelling, which, in turn, can cause knocking. Pipes that aren't properly secured can also produce a knocking sound when water is turned on or off. And I don't even have to remind you about mice, rats, and squirrels. But I do find it interesting that Joe's experience took place shortly after his first strange experience. Something that leads me to think one of two things. Either whatever Joe witnessed followed him home, or perhaps the sighting he had put him on high alert, which is how he was able to notice the knocks, something that may have been there for some time, whatever it happens to be. Either way, Joe, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to share your story. I need to look up more about this lighthouse business now, I think. In the interest of keeping the train rolling, we're going to move on to our next call. The following comes to us from an anonymous source from the state of Georgia.
Hi, yes, I'm calling from South Georgia, and I had debated whether to call you or not, but since I'd recently discovered your podcast channel, I had listened to some of the other stories and thought maybe I would call and share some events that happened to me a number of years ago when I was a small child. So back in 1969, my family, which was myself, my 3 older sisters, my mom and dad, lived in Pensacola, Florida. Due to a hurricane in the summer of 1969, our home received a lot of damage, and my mom decided that she wanted the family to move back to South Georgia again. So my dad was able to get a transfer from his job back to Southwest Georgia. We rented a small house for just a few months while we were waiting for a house to buy. The house was several blocks from where my grandparents lived, so it was very convenient for my parents. Anyway, like I said, I had 3 older sisters. 2 of my sisters were teenagers, and they shared a bedroom. And then my sister, who was a little older than me, I believe she was probably 9, she had her own bedroom, and I had my own bedroom, and I was 7. So not too long after we moved in the house, my sister, who was 9, she started becoming frightened about staying in her bedroom by herself at night, and she told my parents that there was a woman in her mirror. Her bed was such that she could lay at her bed and she could look across to her dresser, and she could actually see herself in the mirror, and with the reflection from the nightlight, she could see pretty well. So she got in the habit of sneaking into my bedroom with me and sleeping in my bed with me after my parents went to sleep, because she would tell me that there was a woman in her mirror. And that went on for maybe a couple of months. One night, my grandfather had to go out of town for 3 days, and so my sister spent the night with my grandmother, who, like I said, lived a few blocks away. So that night, when I was sleeping in my room, I woke up, and there was a woman who at first I thought was my mother standing in my bedroom. And I had a nightlight as well, so I could see her. She was standing by the door, which was cracked open. So she appeared to look at me for a few minutes, and then she turned to walk away. And thinking it was my mom, I got up to follow her. She was walking towards my sister's room, which, as I said, my sister was sleeping over at my grandmother's house, and so the room was empty and the door was closed. Well, as she was walking, she walked into the room, and as I went to follow her, I smacked into the door, because it turns out the door was closed and she had walked through it. So at that point, I was a little frightened, but I think I was mostly sleepy, so I just went back and got into my bed. So the next night again, my sister was still sleeping over at my grandparents' house. I woke up again in the middle of the night, and the woman was still standing in my room again. She had a white, like a gown, I guess you call it, a nightgown on, and she had dark hair like my mother's, but it was a little bit longer. This time she was standing next to my bed, and she was just looking down at me. And I can just remember just being froze, not being able to do anything. And she just stood there for what seemed like an hour, but I'm sure it was just several minutes. And I put my head under the covers and just laid there for I don't know how long. And I finally, when I peeked out, she was gone. And then, just as small children do, I just fell back to sleep. So the third night, which was actually the last night my sister was not going to be sleeping in her room, again, I woke up in the middle of the night, and this person, this woman, she was leaning over my bed, and her face was just like several inches from my face. And I had the feeling that there was a pillow across my chest, and I could imagine that there was the weight of her body on the pillow, however, and my hands were pinned beneath the pillow, and I was just frozen. Couldn't do anything. I just stared straight in her eyes, which were like, 4 inches above my face. And I was aware that I was just breathing heavy. And then all of a sudden, my mom and dad came in the room and turned the light on, and the woman disappeared. And my mom said that I had been making these loud, groaning, sort of screaming noises, and then she just assumed I had a bad dream. So she sat in there with me for just a little while, and my dad went back to bed. And then, of course, I fell back to sleep. On the fourth night, my sister returned home from spending 3 nights with my grandmother while my grandfather was out of town. And just like she had previously, as soon as my parents went to bed, she would come in and sleep with me. And I told her the first night back that I had seen the lady that was in her mirror. And I can't really remember what we said at that point, but this went on for several more weeks. If either my sister would spend the night with my grandparents, or she might stay with one of her friends at a sleepover party, but the other night she would come in my room after my parents went to bed. The strange thing is, though, that every night she came to stay in my bed with me, the woman wouldn't come into my room like she did when my sister was away. I don't know if if the woman just wanted that room to herself. I'm not quite sure why, but after a few months, we ended up moving into a house that my parents bought, and I never really told the story to too many people throughout the years, and sometimes I would go years without thinking of it. But since I started listening to your podcast and listening to other people tell their stories, it sort of brought back those memories, and I thought that I would share those with you. Thanks.
Thank you, caller. Now, to me, this sounds a lot like sleep paralysis. But it makes no sense that both the caller and his sister saw the same apparition. That's certainly not the way sleep paralysis usually works. Unless perhaps both the caller and his sister saw the same scary film, with the same scary ghost lady. And then, while experiencing their own sleep paralysis episodes, they each hallucinated the same image independently. Again, not likely that that's the case. That's a bit of a stretch in itself, but the way these paranormal encounters work, it's drawing at straws until you find something that really seems to stick. So thank you very much, caller, for taking the time to share that terrifying story. Now, before I launch into our next call of the evening, I want to remind everyone that I recently sat down with Justin and formerly Jen, now Harley, of the Glimmerman experiences from Season 6 for an upcoming Patreon deep dive. I'm hoping to get that episode edited and out by Monday morning. So you still have a few days if you want to sign on to Patreon. Just hit up patreon.com and search for Monsters Among Us podcast. $4 a month gets you access to all the back episodes, videos, and everything that's been available to past Patreon members. And I shouldn't tell you this, but if you really want to check out the episode, you can sign on for 1 month and cancel, and it's only going to cost you $4. But if you like what you hear, this is going to be 2 extra episodes a month, 1 paranormal news episode, and 1 deep dive on a past call episode. So if you find it's something you're interested in, hang on for a couple months and see what comes out. So again, that's patreon.com/ I think Monsters Among Us podcast, or just search Monsters Among Us podcast, or better yet, hit the link up in tonight's show notes. And on that note, our next call of the evening comes to us from Samuel in the state of Texas.
Hi, my name is Samuel. The story that I'm about to go ahead and tell you takes place in San Antonio, Texas, Beacon Field Drive, 1994-95. Four of my siblings and my parents, of course, moved into a new house. One of the first things that people told us was that before we moved in, a newborn baby, I guess, had fallen off out of the screen and hit the pavement right below the master bedroom. Didn't take that too seriously, but it was something that the kids around the neighborhood just did tell us. Our parents never mentioned any of it to us. After we moved in, a few strange occurrences happened, of course. One of the first things, and there is actually photographic evidence of this, was early in the morning, foggy. My brothers woke me up because they would wake up before I did to get to their school. And they said they saw a ghost down on our backyard, in the farmhouse in our backyard. Now, the farmhouse was across the street, but we could see it clear as day, literally across the street from where we lived, in the back. And it was about 3 to 5 acres of land, as I recall. And right next to that was a cemetery. Now back to the story of the ghost. Naturally, being a little bit younger than them, freaked me out, but I happened to look out the window anyway. And the figure I saw seemed like a person wearing a wedding dress, who my young sister says that she swears was not touching the ground. And I do recall that the veil was very, very long, though. And in fact, it's more than recall. There is a photograph somewhere between me and my family members of this picture, of this one figure. The second occurrence happened is that the cemetery was always a hot spot for weird things. One of the things that I recall seeing is a really disturbing person doing, I don't know, I guess I could go ahead and say demented acts at the cemetery. So it was a really strange place. Now, Halloween night, 1995, that's a little more personal. My siblings and I went to a party in right across the street from our house, and in the front side, obviously. And what happened is that somebody brought out a Ouija board, and me and my siblings were pretty religious. We didn't really want to dabble in that stuff. And so I asked my brother to take me home, and one of his friends said, ask the Ouija board, should Tim go home? The Ouija board then started to move, and you could take it how you want. It said, IFHEWANTSTODIE. Which of course spells if you wants to die. And I guess and just like that, it was a garage party, mind you. We look out, we start walking, and there's a car of a group of a gang that had issues with my brother. They kept circling the block a couple times, which was strange, given that what just happened with the Ouija board. I still get chills talking about this. We ran home first chance we got. Of course, locked the door and called it a night. And not too long after that, around winter break, my brothers went back home to move with their mom in Albuquerque. I did, and then my family moved about a couple months later. We still talk about this. Again, there is photographic evidence of the strange bride, ghost, whatever you want to call it, from the farmhouse. And weird thing about that farmhouse is there was land, but I never recall actually ever seeing anybody live there. It was run down. It's what you would really describe as a run-down shack. Looks almost unlivable.
Thank you, Samuel. Unfortunately, it seems that Samuel's call was a bit cut off, but I think we got the gist of most of it. Now, Samuel, do me a favor and email me that picture. I'm really interested to see what you guys captured there. Now, speaking of the lady, is it possible that this mystery woman is responsible for nearly all of the encounters that Samuel mentioned? If she's homeless and living behind the graveyard, is it possible that she might also howl at night or wear a found wedding dress? Now, also, the infant that Samuel mentioned, that kind of information should be available either through death records or perhaps some genealogy or even news reports from the time. That kind of information is valuable in trying to determine, exactly who may be haunting something or perhaps what. And the last thing I want to mention is that if the spirits did what Samuel claims, then perhaps they can't be all that bad, because it seemed they helped keep him and his brother out of harm's way. Thank you again, Samuel, for taking the time to share your call. Now, before I play the last couple calls of the evening, I need to cover a few of these announcements. Next week will be dark, and I truly apologize for that, but I'm actually going to take a couple days off, and Sarah and I are going to go camping with our friends. So, next week there will be no new show, but the good news is that on Sunday there will be the Patreon episode that I talked about, and hopefully, perhaps as early as that Friday, I'll have not only one, but 2 new videos released. And I am not releasing those strictly through Patreon. Those are going to be released wide for reasons I've mentioned in the past. So there will be new content coming out. It just won't be in the form of a show, at least for next week. After that, we're going to be back on a regularly scheduled program. And in fact, I have plans to record a couple episodes ahead, so I shouldn't be missing any more episodes here anytime soon. Unfortunately, with the shooting of the TV show and Cryptid Crate and all the other stuff, I'm just simply out of time, and I don't have enough time to prepare or record next week. So I'm going to take a little mini vacation, something I desperately need anyway. So please bear with me while I'm doing that. And speaking of episodes, I've had several people reach out to me about the past episodes. Apparently, a lot of these are not available on the website due to some broken links. I know what the problem is, it's just a matter of me sitting down and fixing it, so I am aware of the issue. In the meantime, if you're trying to reach some of the early episodes, and I don't know why you would do this, but if you want to listen to them, you can go to libsyn.com and search Monsters Among Us podcast, and you can find every single episode I've ever released available there, streaming and for download for free. Simply go to libsyn.com, search Monsters Among Us podcast, and I think it's under the content tab or somewhere in there. Everything should be available. I might actually have Addie post something up in the Facebook group this week to kind of direct you guys to that. But hopefully here in the next week or two, I'll have the time to actually get those links fixed, and it won't be much of an issue. And lastly, I mentioned the TV show, but I'm going to mention it again. If you guys want to see my ugly mug on the television, every Wednesday night at 10 Eastern, you can catch Paranormal Caught on Camera on the Travel Channel. They dive into some interesting footage. Some is more interesting than others, but it's a pretty good time and a great gateway drug for the paranormal world. So if you have a significant other or a friend you're trying to get into the field, this is a great door opener, so to speak. And lastly, if you have a story you would like to share on the show, simply give me a call on the hotline at 1-888-608-NIGHT. That's 1-888-608-6444. Or shoot me an email at monstersamonguspodcast@gmail.com. Or, there's a third option, you can click the Report Your Sightings tab on the website, which is monstersamonguspodcast.com. And with those out of the way, our next call of the evening comes to us from Derek in North Carolina.
Hey Derek, this is Derek from North Carolina. I'm a huge fan of the show. I'm a huge fan of paranormal stuff. I always like listening to hear if I hear things that are similar, and I've heard a lot of similar stories. And sometimes when these things kind of happen to you, you don't really know how to react. And the more I think about the situation, it makes more sense. So we bought a house in 2017, and it was an older house. And this, we bought it around the May, June time of the year. So North Carolina, it's an early summer, even though it's spring, everything's really hot still. So we kind of moved in, and it's a way bigger house than we were used to. And kind of settling into something this big is, not normal. For someone who's been in smaller houses, it's hard to acclimate to a size change like that. But our neighbors and everybody have been really cool and, kind of told us about crazy things, people that lived in this house before us. We think that it was a rental, and then they kind of flipped it. So my mom's a very spiritual person, and I had to ask her what to do in this situation because I didn't know. She's always been one that she's kind of in tune with spirits, I'll just say. And I feel like she's always been kind of hesitant to talk about it just because it's something that she kind of holds, close to her heart. So it was, I would say, probably morning time when this happened, and I was sitting in our bedroom, and we have about 19 windows in this house, right? 19. So there's a lot of light that comes in. So when everything is kind of dark in the morning, it's very odd. I want to say it never got close enough to me, but I want to say it was a shadow person. I was laying in our bed, and our bed peers straight down the hall to the stairs. The stairs would be the middle part of the upstairs, and then you have two bedrooms on each side. So back right side of the house is the master bedroom. So I was laying in the bed with the dog, and my wife had gone downstairs to get ready for work. I just remember staring in the hall, and everything kind of, I want to say it was like a black light growing almost. It wasn't light, but it was like a black emptiness kind of growing in the middle of the hall, kind of pulling the ceiling and the walls into darkness. And it was the shape of a person. It definitely was the shape of a person. It was so bizarre. I didn't feel fear when I stared at it. I just felt this empty feeling almost, like kind of pulling my energy almost. Not like I was dying or anything, but like pulling energy out of my body almost, like just like feeling like nothing almost. But I remember staring at it for a short time, and if it had eyes, if it was a person, like looking into the facial area of this dark mass, and then it just subsided. It freaked me out afterwards. I felt very, just kind of uneasy. And it took me about a couple of days to kind of ask my mom, like, what do you think about this? And she told me, to do this ritual. When, you're in a new space, you just take a broom. You're not actually, like, shuffling anything or sweeping anything. You're just doing the gesture with a broom, and you're saying, you're not welcome. Dark spirits are not welcome here. And I did that throughout the house, and it hasn't happened since. You basically push everything out, is what my mom was saying. Yeah, so I'm hoping that this, will help people out if they've had any of these issues, and maybe not. I don't know. I was kind of skeptical about it, but it seems to have worked out very well. Yeah, thanks for letting me share my story. I hope that they hear this on the podcast. Keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing work. I hope I one day can come out to one of the conventions or events that you're doing, get to shake your hand, and just tell you how much I enjoy the show. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Derek. Now, I've heard of saging, holy water, incense, blessings, but I've never thought of using a broom. Now, I have a funny feeling that this tradition has firm roots in Appalachian folklore. This certainly sounds like something from that region. And speaking of shaking my hand at an event, I hope to see you at this year's Cryptid Con, which is September 7th and 8th in Lexington, Kentucky. They have an amazing lineup for this year, including Bobo Fay, Cliff Brackman, David Pilates, Seth Breedlove, Jeff Meldrum, and, as if that's not enough, there's a rumor that I'll be hosting this year's town hall meeting once again. That rumor's true, by the way. And looking at the clock, that tells me that I have time for one last call. So the following is Sarah's call from the state of Texas.
Hi, Derek. My name is Sarah. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. What's that cliche saying? Long-time listener, first-time caller? I've had the flu for about 2.5 days straight, and your podcast has been the only thing to get me through being home alone. I have a story to share, and I really don't know what category it fit in, but I knew you were the one to call. This was several years ago. Let me preface by saying that I come from a long line of, we call them curanderas in Mexico. However, they didn't practice just white magic. They practiced a lot of dark arts as well. Growing up was always very difficult for me, struggling between, having a Christian faith and also my father's side of the family that practiced all of these things. I was orphaned at a really early age. I was 11 years old and both of my parents passed away. At the time, I was living with an aunt in Oak Cliff, which is a kind of sub-part of Dallas, and a pretty bad neighborhood that wasn't really good for bringing up, rebellious children or children in any facet. So I often had a tendency at around, I think I was 13 at the time, to sneak out of the house to go hang out. I had recently acquired a little boyfriend, and my best friend, who lived across the street, would come through the alleyway to the back of my house where my bedroom was. I'd jump out the window, and we'd go off to what we call Jefferson Street. It's the main street in Oak Cliff, where all of the little shops and stores and stuff were. There was a 24-hour McDonald's there, so we would sneak out after our parents, in this case my aunt, would fall asleep, and we'd go hang out. We only had a few bucks, between all of us, so we'd buy french fries and, milkshakes and hang out until they closed. So this time, we were hanging out, and again, it was a 24-hour, but the dining room closed around midnight. so we were forced to leave. As we were walking home, we parted ways with my little boyfriend, and me and my best friend started walking back towards our house. As we passed the busy streets, which would be Jefferson and 12th Street and Oak Cliff, we started getting into the residential areas. Back then, there was also a large nursing home that was in the same neighborhood on the same street as our houses were. That was always a spooky place at night, but we were still a few blocks away from that home. As soon as we started walking and passing the busy streets and getting into the residential area where there was no lighting back then, this had to be in the late 90s, middle 90s, early 90s, not too early. Sorry, it's a little hazy for me. I do have the flu. In the darkness, going towards the home, I started hearing noises above us in the trees. It sounded like heavy fluttering, heavy wings. There was some high-pitched kind of screaming sounds, but they were far away. The more we walked, the closer they became. I began to notice that as I walked past a tree, whatever was flying above us would land on that tree and wait for us to gain some distance and then fly up to the next tree near us, and it was following us. My friend, noticeably, afraid, said, "Hey, I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to run home." Decides to take her alleyway to her house, leaving me in the middle of the street to make the L turn and go to my home. So she dumped me, hauling butt all the way down to her house. As I'm walking, I'm starting to feel very nervous, and I had the very sharp, prickly sensations in the back of my neck and my ears, and I could feel the hair on my arms begin to stand up. I kept looking in the trees, trying to figure out what was following me, and I couldn't find anything. I couldn't see anything. In the opening of my home, we have this very, very large tree that was kind of the familiar neighborhood big tree, that everybody saw in the front of our house. It was a big catalpa that stood right in front of, the opening of the home towards the doorway. My home, incidentally, used to be a boarding home, over 100 years old. So this antique house is built very, very spookily. It's a scary home to be in, and I'll share more stories about that later. But as I'm trying to run to make the entrance of this home, this thing is continuing to fly above me and follow me. Now, when I explained to you what I saw, I've never heard anyone speak about it, especially on any type of cryptid podcast or anything. So I get to the house, and I'm banging on the glass door. At this point, I don't care if I get in trouble that I got caught sneaking out. This thing is following me. I hear the thing land in the trees in front of my home, the tree in front of my home. I'm screaming and banging on the door. At this point, it's, after midnight, clear skies, warm spring day, no big deal, but I'm terrified. My aunt opens the door. She looks behind me into onto the tree, and she screams at me to get in the house, and she starts cussing and praying, and out of her little pocket, because she always wore these little aprons with big pockets, she pulls out a small bottle of holy water and starts throwing it at the air behind me. I run into the house, run straight to my room, lock the door, and the only thing I could do is jump on the bed crying and praying at the same time. However, when I turned around and she was yelling at me to go into the house, I noticed this huge bird. I would almost say that it looked like a huge bald eagle or a huge type of, I can't explain it, but it had the face of a female, a human female. Now, I know that sometimes people equate, alien visitations that look like owls and, with human faces or I don't know. However, this wasn't the case. It wasn't an owl type of body. It was more of a bird with large claws and a large wingspan. But the face is what killed me. In Mexico, we call these witches, and they're called lechuzas. Now, a lechuza is a witch that is set out to cause harm and, curse the family or for whatever reason, harm the person that it's attacking. There are ways to combat this, but, I wasn't aware, and I didn't practice the things that my family practiced. I wasn't into dark arts. I wasn't into anything like that. So I had no reason, to be attacked or to be followed. So days after that, yes, my aunt, prayed through holy water, did everything that she could. Days after that, I would be in my room, and at 3 a.m, you could hear pecking on my window as if a beak was, pecking at the window. I was too afraid to open the windows and look out, but I knew what it was, and I knew who it was or what was after me. I also would go to the restroom, and in the restroom, that old house, we had small windows that were, high above your chest area. You could barely, kind of neck and above those little windows in the bathrooms, and it had a blind. And I would go to the restroom at night, and I could hear pecking on the windows. This thing followed me for 3 months. I lost a lot of sleep. I became an insomniac, and it wasn't until I ended up leaving for a group home that it stopped following me. To this day, I still don't know what it is. All I know is that I remember that face. There were several other paranormal situations that we were put in living in that home, and then now, coincidentally, the rest of my life has been pretty scarred, and I have other experiences to share. I just became a Patreon member, tier 2, of course, and really love what you're doing. Again, thank you for helping me get through this flu, and I hope to call in soon again. Thanks, Derek. Have a good one.
Thank you, Sarah, and I hope that you're feeling better. Now, I don't know a lot about the spiritual side of your encounter, but I can tell you I know a bit about the biological side of it. There is actually an often reported creature known as the Thunderbird, which is said to be a gigantic bird somewhere up to 20 to 30 feet in wingspan, that is said to have the ability to carry off people and livestock. Now, we've experienced a few calls over the past few years regarding these infamous creatures, but I thought I would take a moment to touch on a particular case from Lawndale, Illinois in 1977. The following clip comes courtesy of Monster Quest, Season 1, Episode 4.
Lawndale, Illinois, July 25th, 1977.
1003, 1004, 1005, 1000.
I was in my backyard one day playing hide and seek with a couple friends of mine, Willie and Travis.
Marlin Lowe is 10 years old and weighs about 60 pounds.
1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010. Ready or not, here I come.
And I run around the house.
Suddenly, something descends upon him from above.
Something just swooped down and grabbed me. I didn't hear it, didn't smell it, didn't see nothing coming. So I looked up and I seen a big old bird.
According to Lowe, the bird uses its long, curved talons to grasp the sleeves of his tank top and lift him at least a foot into the air. Marlin's mother, Ruth, sees the attack from the house.
Oh, my mom, she took off at me when she seen it. She took off running at me.
Marlin struggles to free himself. Already, the bird has carried him a distance of nearly 40 feet.
And it dropped me, and when it dropped me, I just took off running.
Marlin and 4 other witnesses watch, stunned, as the bird flies off.
Oh my God!
And then it flew up in this tree right here, tried to land in the tree right here. And it was too much weight, so they just took off flying on out of the tree and headed for the creek.
Marlin Lowe's mother files a report with the sheriff's deputy and a county conservation officer. He tells her that her son has been attacked by a turkey vulture. Not satisfied, Ruth Lowe researches large birds at the public library and concludes that the perpetrator was similar to a California condor.
But it looked kind of like a condor because it had a white ring and it was black.
Marlin Lowe and his mother describe a coal-black bird with a white ring around its neck, a body as big as a man's, and a wingspan of more than 15 feet in length.
Now, a good friend of the show, Seth Breedlove, and his troupe, Small Town Monsters, is putting together a documentary based not only on Marlin's experience, but the entire Thunderbird legacy. I don't have a release date yet for that, but it's definitely something you're going to want to keep your eyes open for. Thank you again, Sarah, for taking the time to share your call. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight on what others have seen, and in the meantime, I'm certainly going to do my research on the witches that you spoke of. And that's going to do it for this episode. Monsters Among Us was written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Additional support was provided by Warren Pon Abbott, Addie Lloyd, and Tony Bell. All audio used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. And music for this episode was provided by Mayu and Coag Music. Thank you all for listening, and until next week. I knew you would stick around, and I knew I didn't want to let you down. I'm feeling awfully lazy today, so instead of reading a secret story, I'm going to play a secret call instead. So the following is Kandis Call, out of the state of New York.
Hi Derek, my name is Candy and I'm calling from New York. And I'm calling because I heard you in another podcast about a week ago mention Black Panthers. And I wouldn't have ever thought of Black Panthers as being anything more than a natural animal, but certainly not seen in this part of the country. And about 8 years ago, I was driving down a little back road in Connecticut, which is right over the border from where I live in New York. And I thought I saw a standard poodle, a black standard poodle, a large variety, and it looked like it was staggering to me because, you know, dogs have a certain loping walk, and I drove up to see what the heck was the matter with this animal, and as I approached and my vision got clearer, I could see that it was not a dog at all. It was actually a large black cat, about 5 feet long, had a thick type muscular tail, about 3 feet long. Every muscle in this black shiny coat was visible as it walked, and it looked over its right shoulder at me where I saw its face, and looked back ahead and took one bounding leap off the left-hand side of the road into a thicket of trees. I drove up another, I don't know, probably 75 feet and parked by where it ran into the woods and got out of my car, probably foolishly, to see if I could see it and possibly get a picture, but it was gone. It just blended right into the woods and I couldn't see anything. But I was so shocked and surprised at what I'd seen. I went home and looked up any kind of conservation department that I could report this to, and I was told that it was probably a bobcat or a mountain lion. Now, it's a possibility that it's a black mountain lion. I mean, I guess that's a possibility, but it certainly wasn't a bobcat, and it was nothing else because I saw it in broad daylight within 75 feet at the closest, and it was quite visible that it was a large black panther. So I don't know how to explain that, but that's what I saw, and I figured I'd share it with you. So thank you for your show. I enjoy it very much, and I'll keep on listening. Have a good day.
Thank you, Candy. Now, as I mentioned in the very first episode of this podcast, I discussed the possibility of a black or melanistic cougar, or mountain lion. And while I won't say it is not possible, that mutation has never been proven to exist in that particular species, which would mean that what people like Candy and even myself are seeing is something completely different. And speaking of my encounter, I recently sat down with my brother Trevor to discuss our sighting in the very first deep dive episode on Patreon. So if you'd like to hear our breakdown on what happened to us, you know what to do. That's one more sighting, one more piece of anecdotal evidence to help us solve this little mystery. Thank you again for taking the time to share your call, and thank you for sticking around to the end of this show. Have a good night.